Salvete omnes. Today we will be learning from Chapter 6 of Wheelock, which includes the imperfect and future of sum and possum and complementary infinitives. On your screen you can see the present active indicative of sum esse, which we learned in Chapter 4. The main thing we will be learning in this chapter is the imperfect and future of this verb, as well as a related verb, possum. Let's first do the forms of sum esse. On your screen, you can see the imperfect of sum. The first person singular is aram, the second person singular is aras, and the third person singular is arat. The first person plural is aramus, the second person plural is aratis, and the third person plural is arant. As you'll recall from last chapter, the imperfect is usually formed by inserting the ba infix between the stem and endings. While the imperfect of sum esse does not use this infix, it does share some similarities with the other imperfects. This is the fact that a shows up in every single form. Be sure to memorize these forms. Now on your screen, you can see the future indicative of sum. The first person singular is ero, the second person singular is eris, the third person singular is erit, the first person plural is eramus, the second person plural is eritis, and the third person plural is erund. Just like the imperfect, these forms of sum do not use the infix like other future forms, but the vowels do echo the other verbs. You will want to memorize these forms as well. This chapter also introduces the verb possum. This verb means to be able and is formed by adding pos or pot in front of the forms of sum. Whether you use pos or pot is determined by the first letter of the form of sum. The Romans didn't like the sound of a T next to an S, so in forms of sum that start with an S, sumus, sumus, and sunt, they used pos. When the forms of sum begin with a vowel, s, est, and estis, they added pot. Using this methodology, the present forms of possum are as follows. Possum in the first person singular, potes in the second person singular, potest in the third person singular, possumus in the first person plural, potestis in the second person plural, and possunt in the third person plural. The imperfect and future of possum is just pot plus the imperfect and future forms of sum. Thus, the imperfect of possum is pateram in the first person singular, pateras in the second person singular, paterat in the third person singular, pateramus in the first person plural, pateratis in the second person plural, and paterant in the third person plural. The future of possum is patero in the first person singular, pateris in the second person singular, paterit in the third person singular, paterimus in the first person plural, pateritis in the second person plural, and paterunt in the third person plural. The final thing that is introduced in this chapter is the grammatical concept of the complementary infinitive. Just like in English, certain Latin verbs require an infinitive to complete their meaning. We've seen one of these already, debeo, debere. Possum posse is also a major one, as well as a few more verbs you will learn in the future, like audeo, audere, to dare. In the first example on your screen, superare completes the meaning of poterant, we're able to overcome. In the second example on your screen, remanere completes the meaning of potest, not able to remain. In the final example on your screen, conservare completes the meaning of debes, you ought to save. Now, whenever you see an infinitive on your parsing sentences, it can possibly have the function of complementary infinitive. However, remember not all infinitives are complementary, so use context clues to help you figure it out. The story on this chapter's worksheet is from Livy. Titus Livius was born in 59 BC and died in 17 AD. He is a famous Roman historiographer, or writer of history. His main work is Ab Urbe Condita, or From the Founding of the City, which covers the period from the earliest legends of Rome, before the traditional foundation in 753 BC, through the reign of Augustus in Livy's own time. At its completion in ancient times, there was 142 volumes. However, only 35 of those survive today. The passage in your homework is from the preface to his work, where you can see one of the major themes will be the decline of Roman morals. That's all for this chapter. Be sure to start working on your worksheet for this chapter. I also don't want to freak you out, but I do want to remind you that your first test will take place after Chapter 9, so you might want to start thinking about studying for that. If you have any questions, email me. Volete omnes.